Welcome to the Be Honest Man podcast, a discussion among men of various perspectives on subjects from the taboo to the typical. This is episode 4. Now, boys, I want to get into everyone's week, see what they've been doing, what's been going on, but first of all, I want to welcome Andy back from his absence. So how's that been?
Uh, um, Not fun. Sitting in quarantine. Had a little bit of the old COVID-19. I dodged it for a good 2 years, and it got me.
Yeah, you got
Which
it
was
late.
Yeah, I did. I was surprised with the wife working in the medical field that I did not get it earlier. It took sitting in a car with somebody for 15 hours who was just coughing in your ear the entire drive to finally get it. But I'm back.
Yeah,
So,
stuck in tight
hey.
spaces with somebody coughing. Just like,
Yeah,
please.
It's no way out of that one.
I got it in January, so it took me a long time to get it as well. But then I went to like a gaming event with hundreds of people, and I ended up getting it. So yeah,
Yeah.
we
I
got it
avoided
late
for a
but
bit, especially which was surprising dealing with the patients. But I got the vaccines worked pretty good early on. Like my whole crew got it at one point, except for me and my partner Brittany. We were the only ones vaccinated, and so we were the only ones who had to show up for work for they were giving you like a week plus at that time.
Yeah, it's like a 2-week window.
Yeah, so it was like you were getting a lot of, and it was like paid time off. It was great.
Yeah.
But I just didn't get to take advantage of that. I got it later on when they took that away.
Yeah, no one cares anymore.
Yeah.
Nope. Like 5 days, get back to work.
We're having a new resurgence. So we're in crisis mode. They pretty much said, "Hey, if you got to mask up and show up." That's legit.
I think everybody here has had it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
Yep.
Yeah, we've all had it now. I think me, you, and Chris all got it this year, like 2022. Right? Yeah, we all got it in 2022. We avoided it for quite some time. I figured that at some point I got it, but I just have a superior immune system and it just didn't affect me. And then I got it and was like, dang.
Oh yeah.
Not that great. I'm not actually all that great. So
well, we're glad to have you back. We're better for it.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
This episode, it's a big one. It's one we kind of put off talking about because we wanted to work out all our kinks, kind of figure out our flow, kind of work on our podcasting skills. But I think it's time, and it's part of the reason we waited to get Indy back, because we want to have different looks at it, different perspectives. But the subject is going to be mental health, kind of a general look at all the different aspects and different things that come to that. I know it's one we've all been kind of, I don't want to say chomping at the bit to talk about, but it's just kind of one of those subjects that is personal to most people these days. We're all a lot more aware than generations past. Yeah, definitely looking forward. I know we've alluded to it and mentioned it in previous episodes, but we're finally getting time to really dive deep. I know you guys are excited too.
Yeah, I think you and Chris are probably the most hyped for it. I know, Indy, what did you say? You have like the
Mr. Happy Brain.
Yeah, Mr. Happy Brain or something, so it's going to be a different experience for you to hear like other people's thoughts, and you've learned through experiencing it with others, I believe is the way you said it, and I have
brought to my attention, I did have one thing that I'm actually excited to talk about. I do have something to relate.
So, okay, all right, you got a little something. You're not perfect.
I got a little something. Exactly.
And for me, I've had like situational things that have led me down sort of mental health things, but I don't know that I've ever just outright been like, oh, I struggle with this specific, the big ones, right? Like depression, anxiety, things you hear a lot about. So it'll be interesting to kind of get like that take, as well as hearing the ones from people who have had much more in-depth, whether it's depression, things like that. And also just talk about things that we've done to help combat it, suggestions we have, recommendations, all that. But before we do that, I guess let's just make the general disclaimer. We are not therapists. We are not doctors. If you need help, if you are feeling alone, if you are feeling down, anything like that, please seek guidance, reach out to somebody, talk to somebody. We promise people want you to be here. And with that said, who wants to kick us off here and talking about mental health?
I know a lot of it deals with stress, internal, external stress. That can lead to a lot of mental health issues with a lot of different people. I think that's probably the overlying thing for most people with any kind of mental health issue is the stress of something, whether it be work, money, relationships, just self-doubt, whatever the case may be. A lot of that comes from stress. I don't know if you guys could speak to that.
I think
as well.
I want to say yes, but also no, I think for some things and situational things, that's the truth. But I also believe that, for some like depression, that's not necessarily just stress. I mean, that's a
Well,
biological deficiency or numbers not adding up,
well, so the thing with if you don't have a healthy way to deal with stress and you don't do something to kind of, mitigate it, or, however you want to put it, it could definitely lead you down some roads that are rather unhealthy. Now, is it going to send you down this rabbit hole and like create, some sort of chemical imbalance based mental illness that wasn't there before? No, but it's definitely going to put you in a place that you wouldn't be if you otherwise had a way to deal with it.
Well,
Now, there are
I
some
think it
things that
can
can
though,
lead you
right?
to. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I mean,
there are
so
things
like
where a
your
temporary.
coping your coping skills are definitely one of those things that can affect, not everybody immediately goes to like, I'm going to start meditating to, de-stress. No, they just start drinking more, or they start using drugs that are a little different, or they might take an extra pain pill when, when they're, and then they're dealing with that. So I mean, it's definitely something that can lead you down some bad roads. I don't want to say that at all, but it could definitely, there's a lot of issues that can come from stress. Stress is one of the more kind of, I guess, like common and dangerous things we deal with these days. That's what a lot of research and science is finding.
What I mostly meant by that though was where you said that it's not going to lead you to have like chemical deficiencies or something like that. But I think, and I could be wrong here. And if you guys know, correct me. If you don't, I'm telling you, I could be wrong here. But I'm pretty sure it's, for instance, grief. When you go through grief, if you don't properly treat it or go through the steps, the quote unquote step, because there's no like direct path sort of thing. If you don't deal with it, cope with it, go through it, whatever it might be, that can turn into actual long-term depression. Like it can actually impact your brain, I
Yeah,
believe. So that's what I mean
Uh,
by,
I got you. And
a stress can lead to those changes.
I think
I
all
just
of
meant,
these like negative things, it's all catalysts that are
Hmm.
gonna,
yeah,
you'll get to some kind of mental health problem, whether it's depression or whatever. But stuff like that, anything like that that goes untreated is, I mean, it's not healthy.
Yeah.
Definitely.
yeah. I didn't mean necessarily that like it's impossible to do that. I'm just saying like in the sense of like day to day stress isn't just gonna flip a switch, and then something's suddenly there. Like either you've had something more severe occur, or you had underlying issues that you just didn't show themselves. I just meant
Uh,
that like you just not managing day to day stress is gonna flip a switch or something, and it's just gonna create out of thin air.
yeah, I mean, I think stress, like this day-to-day stress that everyone deals with, it's been normalized now,
The
especially
hustle, baby.
for, like for men. One of the ways that a lot of men deal with stress is or deal with depression, they'll just dive into their work and try and just cut out everything else. They just focus on work and they work and they work and they work. And it's still not healthy for you. But
Definitely.
stress in general is just normalized that everyone should be stressed. And it's, you're more of a man and you're more important if you're working 80 hours a week versus the guy that's working 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely
You,
have different outlets for dealing with stress, which can be healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note because we said, Sean listed things like, oh, you start popping an extra pill or you start drinking or whatever, which are the things you normally hear about, right? Like you hear about things like that. It leads you down the path of substance abuse. But then Chris talks about it's not always stuff like that. It's you throw yourself into your work or
Yeah.
you throw yourself, like there are other things where you just hardcore commit to something as a distraction, essentially, as a way to be like, oh, this will take my mind off of these things. This is something that I can focus my attention on so I don't have to think about the way that I feel and stuff like that. So there are signs that people may not see. And I think, that'll get into other things we talk about with suicides or just people not reaching out for help and stuff because the signs are there. You're just not expecting them, right? The guy who goes really hard at his job and just never has time, no one ever wants to, not focus on that could be a sign. But to you, it just like, oh, he's really grinding. He's really dedicated. He really wants to get that stuff done. But it's like, oh, no, he's unhappy. And this
Yeah,
is
he's
his way of getting
avoiding
through
something
that.
at home
Exactly.
or
He's avoiding something. There was a clip that I saw recently that was just, all this stuff where you keep setting these goals and you keep trying to be so productive and you keep doing this. Is that actually you wanting all this and doing all that? Or is it just you not wanting to sit with what's making you uncomfortable and what you're trying to avoid? Like you're using
Good
it as
point.
an escape. You're not actually trying to do all these. You're just using it as an escape to avoid the situation that you're in. And I think to some degree it can be good or bad, because sometimes if you go down that path long enough and you do all those productive things and it could pull you out of maybe what you're going through, and then other times it may not. So
So, do you guys have any ways of dealing with stress that can help deter in your own personal experiences? Maybe they've gotten you out of some of these situations or these negative thoughts or
I am,
behaviors.
luckily to have a very supportive wife who understands a lot of what I talk about and deal with. I see a therapist for a lot of stuff, and only recently, I would say in the past like 3-4 months, that I started doing that. I probably should have done it a long time before that. I just waited till I got to the point where it was like severely affecting things before I actually did something about it, because I'm hard headed and I'm a man. And
There you go.
and so luckily I have that. I like, I'll go through phases of different things. Like you'll go through kind of healthier stages where like stuff like meditation is something that you kind of put on your plate to help and stuff like that. Phases where video games has always been a big one that you can just kind of focus on that thing, and not have to. It kind of takes your mind off everything else. Now that can be a detriment at times, if you get too deep into
Oh,
that.
yeah.
But like definitely something I like to, like, at the end of the night, just be like, hey, I just want to spend an hour or two just doing whatever in whatever game.
I used to say Counter-Strike was my one true love, and it was the thing that would distract me from anything. I'd go through a breakup, I'd go through some girl stop talking to me or whatever. Counter-Strike. I'm
Yeah.
loading up and I'm gonna
Yeah.
dome some kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I'm just
video
gonna
games
go in
definitely
there
been
and
my outlet.
just own some noobs. Just
I mean, it's
play
not a
some
bad
rank
one,
ups.
but like
Yeah.
everything, it can definitely be detrimental. So
What about exercise? I know that's been a good one for me. When I get home from work, the first things I do is take my dog out. We go for a walk, and it's a good chance for me after being in my office all day without a window, getting outside, getting some fresh air,
Mm-hmm.
getting to clear my mind of all those things, and then
Yeah.
come back to my home with a clear mind and able to engage with my wife and be a better person, I think.
Exercise has kind of been a slight double-edged sword for me at times, because it's definitely something that makes me feel better about myself when I'm consistent with it. But when I'm not, it kind of has the opposite effect, where I feel like I'm failing in some aspect, or at least I'm not working towards like a lot of the visions I have for myself. So I feel like I'm wasting time, that I'm being lazy, and that has I won't. It might have more of an effect than the positive effects have,
Mm-hmm.
and
We hold
it's something I'm
ourselves to
trying to
really
get
high
better about.
standards.
Yeah,
Like
and
we
it's
we really
something
do.
I'm definitely trying to get better about. Me and my wife were talking. We went for a little hike, like 4 mile hike today, something short, and we're trying to. We're talking about it, and it's like the past couple days I hadn't really worked out because I had a very long week where I wasn't getting a whole lot of sleep. We were doing a lot of stuff at work, and I had went a couple of days without really doing anything beyond like going for walks for working out. I just felt really bad, and her whole thing was like, "We have to, recover. You have to rest." I'm like, "Yeah, I get that, but doing anything, is going to make me feel better. Even if it's just like I'm going to go do some push-ups and some pull-ups and some squats, and that's it. Like 15 minutes of that would make me feel better
Yeah.
than not doing anything. It's not going to severely affect that. It's just a matter, sometimes you just lose, you just don't have the drive to do it, or you plan to do it and something gets in the way. But a couple of days of that in a row, and boy, that exercise will really have the opposite effect.
So, what about you, Chris?
I'm real bad with managing my stress. Video games for me were generally the best way for me to deal with it, but it also made me realize that it kind of turns into like a sign when I'm not having a good time. One of the symptoms of depression, you start like losing, you can't find joy in things that you used to. The
Mm-hmm.
things that you like to
Mhm.
do don't sound as appealing or don't make you as happy. So I started to realize that if I'm starting to feel that way while I'm trying to de-stress and play video games, it ends up not helping me.
Yeah.
Because it
Loss
can
of
add to it,
interest.
right? Like you're like, wait, this is my thing. This is supposed to be my happy thing. Why am I not happy? And then that kind of like adds another thing to be like, well, crap. Like,
Yeah, especially when you get in that kind of that spiral of like, I'm gonna go play this. Oh, this isn't making me happy. Now I don't know what to play. So then you're just stressed out because you can't figure out what to play because you think it's gonna make you feel better, but like nothing's gonna make you feel better, so you're just stressed out about that. And
Mhm.
then yeah, so it's a thing.
Got a
It's
little
And-
definitely a
spiral
thing.
going.
I guess I want to put it out there for anybody who just sometimes doesn't enjoy playing games, and that's not depression.
That's not
Like
what we're
you're,
talking about.
yeah, you're not exactly like because there are people. I have people coming to the stream all the time. They're like, man, I'm not having fun playing anything. And I'm not saying that person can't be depressed. That can't be, but sometimes you probably gamed too much, right? Like you're not getting the same dopamine release from playing that match or playing that game or playing that whatever. You got to take a little bit of break, decompress a little bit. But
Yeah.
I also understand that is, for instance, when I went through loss, I didn't want a game, and that's what I've always done. I've always done that. I was streaming, gaming, all that stuff, and it was kind of that experience of these things aren't bringing me joy. I'm not having any fun with that. So I can kind of understand that where when you realize like, dang, even the things that I love, the things that I've always gone to be that isn't there
And that, I
for
mean,
me.
that could apply to anything. Like we all have we've all met each other and have become friends through gaming, which is why it kind of plays a bigger role in this podcast than maybe some
Mhm.
others. But anything that would normally bring you joy, like that doesn't. I mean, that's a tough situation to be in. It's a very aggravating situation that, like we said, just kind of creates this spiral. And the best way out of that is to sometimes even if you don't have something else you want to do, you've just got to step away from it. Go for a walk. Go,
Mhm.
I don't know, sit and just do something else. You know, go talk,
Yeah.
somebody, whatever. Because like, even if that is your normal coping thing, if it's making it worse, there's no reason to stick around at that time.
Yeah, don't try to force it. So before I get into the things I use, Chris, was there any? I know we kind of just you did talk about gaming, and then we just like kind of went and started talking about that. Did you have other ways that you try to bring your de-stress or try to like manage it?
I do it in the most unhealthy way possible. I just kind of get away from everything and just sit alone.
Don't try to make it better. I just don't de-stress.
Yeah, if it just gets sucked up inside the ball that's already inside of me, just adds to it.
Well, I was gonna sometimes like taking alone time and just chilling isn't necessarily like just sitting and dwelling on it. Sometimes it's giving you the time to either reflect or to get away from needing to reflect, and that kind of helps with that as well. So, I mean, I'm not
You
saying
have to.
maybe you only do the way that you said, like you just sit in it and whatever, but I'm just saying getting away and being alone, there like that can
That
be
takes
okay.
conscious effort though. Like your goal
Yeah.
has to be like I'm gonna go sit and just try and chill out and calm myself and de-stress whatever. And if unless you kind of purposely do that, just sitting there is not going to do it. You're just going to kind of create this boiling sea of stress that you just keep getting washed up in, and that's all that's going to happen.
Yeah, I do a lot of sitting and dwelling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that can be a little unhealthy.
for me, I would say gaming has been one that I kind of go to for things. Recently, over the last 2 years or so, walking. Walking has been something that I've been doing a lot more of. I've also started to, I'm really heavy into the Huberman Lab podcast. So if Dr. Andrew Huberman's listening, dude, love to have you on the show. Man is a genius and has tons of other geniuses on his show. But he kind of has these things that he talks about as pillars to just make your day better, to make your mood better, to make your sleep better, which impacts all these things. They compound. And some of it is like getting sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning because it will kick your body into, hey, all right, we're up. Let's go. It'll open up your energy stores that your body is literally like, hey, save this for when he's up, when he's going and doing stuff. And so little things like that, getting more sunlight, I've noticed has helped me. I will go out, especially now because it's summer, right? I will go out and just walk for 15, 20, 25 minutes, just up and down the block, just
Love it.
up and down, thinking, listening to a podcast, just chilling, letting my eyes relax, my brain relax, looking at horizons versus we're always so focused with our eyes these days. We're always looking at a phone, a screen, reading something, whatever that might be. And, there's like different types of view, like looking at a set device, looking at a horizon naturally like relaxes your eyes and things like they don't have to be focused. All these little things that take away, maybe not the stress of a specific thing that I'm dealing with, but just stress in general, just daily stressors. And if I can remove that off the plate, I feel like it opens up dealing with the other thing better. And so getting sunlight early, getting more sunlight, relaxing more, taking more time to just chill, stuff like that, I think helps a lot for me.
when it comes to chilling, on that same note there, saying no is a big part of that. When it comes to like the external stress, we have people ask us to do things, and we're the kind person, we're the good person, we're always there for people. But sometimes you got to be there for yourself, and if that means saying no, you sometimes you have to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's something that's tough for a lot of men to do. You know, you feel like you've got to be the one to do things, to fix things, to if you if you say no to things, then people won't come to you in the future. That's the fear, right? It's not
Yeah,
the truth, but it's what a lot, might go through our
For
heads.
some people, I'm sure some people ain't scared of that at all. They're like,
Yeah, yeah.
you gonna
No,
leave me
that's what I'm saying.
alone? Like, no.
It
yeah,
depends on what it is, right? Like if it's like, family wanting you to come over and do something, it's like, this time, no, I don't want to. I really just want to chill out. But you don't want them to never invite you to something again,
yeah,
for most people. So like it's just kind of, there's it's definitely a skill that takes some practice. At least for
yeah,
some people. Some people have no problem doing it.
yeah.
Mhm.
I
Setting
am
boundaries.
I'm the opposite. I can't say no to nothing. So
I'm gonna let that one go.
Oh, brother's making some faces.
I'm gonna let that one say no. Okay, bud. Moving on. So, managing stress. Is there any other ways that we can think of? I know you had just kind of started indies, so was there
Oh
anything
no,
else?
just yeah, saying no, and the same thing of exercising, getting out, taking a walk. It's a good way for me to clear my mind and get get my mind right. I guess reset. It's
Hmm.
my reset, and I get wifey to come along so that we both can kind of get out there and just reset, man. When there's a walking trail near my house, we take the dog out, go through the woods, and just hearing nature, having the sun come in, and looking at different animals that are out there. Just I don't know, just clearing your mind. It's just a
Yeah.
good way for me to reset.
I think nature is a good one. I
it
think that's
is.
something I learned again because my main thing in life that has brought me pain and discomfort and all that stuff was loss, and that was something that I also noticed with that. I actually one of the things that brought me more peace and just like whatever was going on walks, as I said, but just freaking looking at trees, man. I'm just like, wow, that's nice. Like simple stuff. You think when you're going through something, you need some grandiose stuff. No, it was the simple stuff that was
Yeah.
just like little animals and trees and the sun, the sky, it was like it was weird how
Oh yeah.
helpful some of those things were.
What's
I
some
saw
it's
I
some
saw a woodpecker for the first time at 40 years old. I was like, wifey is like, you never seen a woodpecker before? No, never seen a woodpecker. I don't know, just weird stuff, man.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of like this modern issue where we think that there has to be something we can buy that can solve our issues. I know I have a problem like I get a big dopamine hit when I buy something new.
Oh yeah.
And for that moment, it's like, yeah, this fixed my problems. And then like several hours later, you're like, yeah, this is cool, but that other thing, that might have been the thing I should have bought, or maybe I
Yeah.
need to make this thing better. So there's a thing called the Diderot effect, where whenever you buy something new, it just makes you want to buy something else. And there's a whole story behind it. You can Google it, but it's true and it's real and it's something that I see in myself, and I think it's this it kind of plays into this thing where in modern times, like I said, we think that whatever if we have stress, if we can just go get this thing, that could help with my stress. If I go buy this thing, and there's never an end to it, and the
Consumerism.
simple stuff, yeah. I mean, but that simple stuff, going for the walks, just chilling out in a park, sitting down on the floor and just petting your dog and not really doing nothing else, just simple things can really, really have a dramatic effect.
Hmm.
Like a lot of that other stuff, everything's temporary, but like there are lasting effects, positive effects on your brain that you get from doing stuff like walking in nature and stuff that you're not going to get from buying, a new, monitor or getting the new phone or shoes or something. It may be like that's going to make me feel good in this moment,
Hmm.
but it's only going to last for 30 minutes or like, 2 hours until you're staring at the screen and be like, "Oh, it doesn't look as good as I thought," or, whatever the situation is.
And that can lead to depression. So, if you guys have any experiences with depression,
Yeah, I mean, so I was a sad boy in middle school and things like that, and My mom took me to a therapist, and I got diagnosed with depression. They put me on antidepressants and that whole thing. I don't think I took them for long. I didn't like the way it made me feel.
Do you remember what it was like? Like, I'm
Yeah,
curious because so many people who are prescribed or whatever, like they don't like antidepressants because of the way they make them feel. So they're
it's
taking
kind
things
of,
that they don't
it doesn't
enjoy.
just pick the bad feelings.
Yeah, so
It
it's that
picks
like
all of your feelings.
everything's flat.
Yeah, everything gets dialed down. Now it's been a very long time since I've been on it, but then that's the best description I can give. So I'm not, again, this is not me telling people not to do it. You have to do what's right for you. Talk to your doctor, your therapist. For me, I couldn't, you know, and I never saw the therapist after that. My mom didn't really have a lot of money to like pay for stuff like that. So yeah, it went a long, 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 long time before I ever saw a therapist again. And I would go through phases where I would get really deeply depressed, and then some things that really you wouldn't think would have such a dramatic effect would. I mean, I remember I don't know how old I was, but I was dating my first girlfriend, Jessica, and we hadn't been dated that long. And I looked out my door because her neighbor, or our neighbor, was her cousin, so she was over there all the time. And she was sitting out there and she was talking to some other boy. And boy, that put me in the most depressed place that I thought I'd ever be in my life. And I went in the we're gonna get really dark here, but I went in the kitchen and I just found some pills, which luckily just turned out to be ibuprofen. And boy, I just took a fuck ton of them. I mean, I just started downing these things, and that's all it took, right? Like it was just seeing that, getting that depressed, thinking like the one true love of my life is now talking to some other boy, and I have leapt over the edge. Luckily, nothing happened. It was just ibuprofen. It is what it is. But that was definitely like one of the earliest things I remember of like realizing, like looking back, it's like no, I was definitely, there was times where I was like in a really dark place and just not, I mean, being a young kid and not knowing how to deal with it, or having no idea what I was actually going through emotionally. And that continued through a lot of my life. There was definitely a lot of other close calls that I went through, plans made, just actions not taken. It's definitely been something I've dealt with a lot, and it's affected a lot of different aspects of my life, from just like not showing up for work, or being really shitty towards people I'm in a relationship with or friends and blowing people off. But then as I've gotten older, I've definitely found better ways to deal with it. I'm more aware of it, and because of that awareness, I can see kind of where I'm at, where I'm heading, and stuff when it comes to like my emotional moods and things like that. And it's helped me manage it a lot better. Again, I said it, towards the beginning, I see a therapist now. Didn't really see him specifically for this, for some other things that I guess we'll get into a little later. Yeah, depression is it's a weird thing, man, because at least for me, it's like, there's kind of this, it used to be very like this deep emotional hole you would get in, where like you were just, there's a pit inside you just filled with sadness, and it just kept growing and growing till it overflowed, and there was all you had was just sadness, the deep sadness. But I don't really feel that way anymore. It's when I get depressed now, I just become completely apathetic. Nothing brings me joy. I see no light in the world. Like it's just existence, for the sake of existence. But I know that I'm aware now when I'm going through it, so I can kind of mitigate it. But it's funny how it changes. And I'm definitely interested, because I know Chris has talked about the depression thing before. I'm definitely interested in seeing if he's had a similar experience with something like that, with it changing or developing over time, or if it's always kind of been the same thing.
I have a couple questions just about like your story and stuff like that. Do you think so?
Yeah.
For instance, when you were talking about seeing Jessica 1 with a
Hmm.
boy in the other yard, you guys have to listen to the last episode to know why she's Jessica 1. So go listen to that. So, most of the time we're told, and again, I'm no expert in depression and stuff like that, that it is just almost like a constant, like it's just a
Hmm.
baseline of sadness. Whereas that was a descriptor of this
An
instant
instantaneous thing.
happened, this
So
happened, and now I'm really sad.
it was,
So
I was already, so that situation was already in a low place,
that's
and
the thing.
something just
It just
tipped you
makes
over,
you closer.
tipped me over
Yeah.
the edge.
So
Yeah.
even if, yeah, it's just one of those things where it makes you just like a little
Yeah,
bit
if I was like
closer.
totally like fine, like my brain was all balanced or whatever, and that happened, I'd probably just been like,
Would have been
Man,
jealous, probably.
this
Like,
sucks.
yeah, you would have been sad
But
or
I wouldn't
jealous.
instantly have just walked into the kitchen and just start fucking, chugging pills.
Yeah. So that's what I was wondering is, it's a baseline, but that means that baseline has you closer to where the same little things that might not impact somebody or
Oh yeah,
force
for
somebody
sure.
to that level, when you're in that state, anything can push you that little bit.
For sure.
So, how are you feeling about that, Chris? Did you have any similar experiences with that?
I'm going to try and not make it too long.
Take as
So
long as you want.
I have never been to a therapist. So I've never been diagnosed with any kind of mental health disorder. But I think it started in middle school, and I didn't know what depression was. I just thought I just thought I was feeling down and I was sad. And it started to show when, I stopped doing any of my schoolwork, any of my homework. When I got into middle school, I was a good student. I was like a straight A student up until like 8th grade, and then that's when my grades started to drop down. And then between 8th to ninth grade that summer, I kind of convinced myself that going into high school is a chance for me to like reinvent myself and try and turn things around and get happy again. So I get into high school and I'm fine for the first, I don't know, half a year, first year. And then it started to go down again after that. And at that point, I was old enough to drive and I just stopped going to school. I stopped doing any kind of schoolwork. I skipped like half a year's worth of classes. I don't know what high school is like now, but our classes were divided into like I had 8 classes, and I would have 4 of them one day, four on another day, and it would alternate like that for the whole year. And my senior year, I skipped every other day for the entire year because I was never happy. I never felt like I never felt like I could get through a day. And throughout this whole high school experience, which I know is probably pretty common for a lot of people. High school is when you're going through puberty and you're maturing and you're starting to feel these things.
Feel
But
feelings.
yeah, you're feeling feelings, and they're not always good feelings. And high school is definitely the hardest part of my life for me dealing with those feelings. I remember one thing that comes out to me in particular. I got my wisdom teeth out my sophomore year in high school, and it sucked, but I was fine. They wrote me a prescription for oxycodone and sent me home. So I got home, took that, went to sleep, woke up, realized, wow, that's the best I felt in a long time. And I went through those pills much faster than any normal person should. And then realized that we had more of those same pills. They were my dad's prescription in our cabinet. I started going through all of those. And throughout all of high school, like that was the best I felt.
I think that's like a perfect description of how those sorts of times, essentially, like how do people get substance abuse, right? Like how do people unlock that is because they're so down, and that's it makes them feel better. And then those substances are the only thing that makes them feel better, you know? And like
Yeah.
that's like case in point of how that stuff works. If you wouldn't have been so down, those pills probably wouldn't have had the same effect, Not to say that they can't, not to say that some people aren't down and depressed and then they have pills and that starts it, but like people talk about, oh, the depressed people and they're addicted to this, they use that as a substance and abuse it, and that's it. Like you got your wisdom teeth out, and all it took was, wow, those pills make me feel better, and it started you on this path of like, oh, I need to pop more of those because that's what makes me feel.
Yeah, a lot of those things with alcohol, drugs, any of those things, they're altering your current state, which is probably just enough to tip you out of whatever you're in or change your feelings, if not really making them better, but to change them enough to where you're like, oh, I'd rather be this way than that way.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people go that route.
So, what has it been like since? I mean, you said that all of high school was like that. So, like, what was post high school? what was it like when you came to that realization with the pills and stuff like that? I guess like the story continues.
Yeah. So in high school, I was not much different than I am now. I was still like huge nerd, and
What?
Stealing
yeah,
loot.
right. It's still the same person, but back then it wasn't as cool to be a nerd, I guess. So
Oh man.
so from elementary school up until my junior year in high school, I had the same group of friends. It was a small four person group of friends, and these were the only people I ever talked to, only people I ever hung out with, sat with at lunch, whatever. So something happens, we end up splitting up, and everyone else that was in that little friend group ended up going to one side, and I was kind of stuck on the other side alone. So
Yeah,
I that's how I ended up meeting Steven. Because after I split from that group of people, I started going to the comic book shop. I started playing Magic because that was something that I had done with them, and I guess it reminded me of like good times that I had.
Hmm. Well, shoot, that was the best possible outcome right there, man.
Yeah, it
Like,
was. Yeah, so all this happens. Uh Fast forward through to the end of my senior year of high school, and this is when I'm actually starting to meet these guys and making these new friends. And now that I'm out of high school, it was like another chance for me to be a different person and reinvent myself again. And out of high school is when I started dating. And it was right off the bat, like a month after I got out of high school, I started seeing this girl. So this was the first girl that I dated that was like an actual like girlfriend, as it would be, as is expected. We end up breaking up, and that was obviously to that point, it was the worst moment of my life.
Not the worst.
At that point, in my head, that was the worst thing in my
yeah.
life.
Mhm. We've all been
Get it,
there.
brother.
We've all lost that
single
girl.
breakup was responsible for, so many like suicidal ideations. But it was after that breakup is when I really started to like go out and hang out with these new guys that I met. And that's what got me through it. Was just
Fate,
having Sean.
fate brought you guys together.
Yeah, fate brought us together, and what got him through it was Hooters and IHOP.
Hooters and IHOP every day for a year. Dude.
This is not an exaggeration to everybody
They almost
listening.
had some
What we
real
would
money.
do is me, Chris, Greg, Charles were like the main four, and we would go to IHOP and Hooters almost every night of the week for a year. We basically go to like Atomic Comics, which is where we would play, and Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever it was. And then from there we would go to Hooters, and then after Hooters, we wouldn't want to be done yet. We go to IHOP, and then eventually it would transfer into we'd go to Greg's house and watch things like True Blood. But that was like 2-3 years of our lives.
Yeah, that's what's made everything so much easier for me. Because obviously I was at a low point in high school, and then it got lower once I realized, I don't have friends. I'm not talking to anyone. The only people I speak to on a normal basis, and normal at that time was once a week, was when I went to Atomic Comics, played Magic, and saw a guy that I played with before.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And now, these guys have seen me go through a lot of relationships and a lot of breakups.
Yes, we have.
You know what's crazy though? I just realized this. So we all talked about the things that help us de-stress, and we mentioned video games, all of us, all four of us. And let me pose you this question. When you come home from work or you finish doing what you're doing for the day and you come home and you want to de-stress, do you just go sit by yourself and play Xbox?
No, it's just the boys, the social
It's the boys,
interaction.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so
I meant to
if
do
it
that.
wasn't
I
for
meant
the
to, yeah.
yeah, if it wasn't for I'll tell you how we do it for those who aren't aware. We come into this app called Discord. and we it's a voice chat thing. So we jump in Discord. If no one's in there, I will still just go in there simple myself because someone will show up eventually, and then you play whatever you want to play. But if no one was in there, I am less likely to sit down and play because most of the time that I'm doing it, I want that social interaction. I want to hang out with my friends and talk to them and stuff like that. The video game, I don't feel like the video game's 100% what does it.
Yeah.
I think that, for at least speaking for myself, and I think it's fair enough to say for at least most of us, it's that social interaction, especially with the people that you know and love, that really helps that de-stress.
I actually meant it. It was in my head when I was going around. We were going around talking about things, and I meant to be like social interaction. I wasn't going to use that example of like gaming with the boys or whatever it might be. But in general, sometimes I find that when I'm down, I want to socially interact with somebody.
Yeah.
Not always in healthy ways, but I want some sort of interaction with another person. So a lot of times when I was down, like getting together with the group, and just hanging out, playing games, whatever, like those things typically would help me out a little bit. They take my minds off of things. They'd show me some good, some happiness, some laughter and stuff like that. So, and I think that's the point of, at this point in Chris's story is that he found people that help him with that. He was getting laughter because we're all really hilarious, and joy because we smoked kids and magic like on a weekly basis, and then wings and hot women at Hooters. So I mean, just all around pretty great.
Peak.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. The cure. As
The cure for depression, friends and boobies.
Yeah, dominate in a nerdy game. Get wings. Look at boobies.
Yep.
That's
So
the formula.
I have a question here for I guess both of you guys here, Chris and Steven. So while you guys were going through this, did you guys talk to anybody? Did anybody know how you were really feeling when you guys were going through these emotions?
For me, absolutely not. Like I said, I had this small group of friends, and we were young. It was something that I never even thought to talk about with them. My parents weren't very helpful in that regard. My parents they were always pushers. I could never miss a day of school. Now taking like a mental health day is common, and people do that, but I couldn't miss a day of school if I was throwing up.
Which you talked about in a previous episode of masculinity, where your dad was like, you don't cry, you don't show emotions. So
yeah,
that kind of goes in with the same thing. Like, why would you go to him about it when he's outright told you like, we don't have emotions here?
Yeah. So I never had an outlet for that kind of stuff.
And then Sean, I believe.
Yeah. My name's Sean, by the way. I don't know if you've been introduced. So early on, like I said, I don't know when or what the timeline was like. I have a terrible memory. I know I saw a therapist at least once. They did the whole look at these pictures, what do you see sort of thing. They, had you talk through scenarios, a bunch of other stuff. And they were like, oh yeah, okay. Depression, whatever. And then I went a long time without seeking any help at all. It wasn't until I was breaking up with that girl, Jessica, and I was just doing everything I could to get out of that relationship in the most cowardly ways possible. Just doing everything other than just saying, hey, it's over. And so this is going to dive into some other things. So I, for a long time, have had issues. One of my main coping mechanisms was pornography. Like, to the point where I would spend entire days, 16 hours of the day, just looking at it, just doing that sort of thing.
Spoiler alert. He wasn't just looking at it.
Oh, let's not be too lewd here, okay, bud?
Just throwing it out there.
So that girlfriend, we had a discussion about that early on in our relationship, and she was not okay with that. So I hid it for a long time. I mean, for years. Like, she just thought that I just never looked at that stuff. And one day, I'm fighting for my life to just have her break up with me because I am too cowardly to do it. And I brought it up, and I was like, I've been looking at porn this whole time, blah, blah, blah. And there's a big fight, there's a big thing. And you know what she does? She says, here's some people that can help. And she sets me with a therapist and is like so supportive and like all these things because she was a genuinely good person. And I'm just being a little shit. And I talked to the guy once and never went back. Didn't
You're
really talk
like,
about
bro,
anything
here's what I
meaningful.
need your help with. How do I get out of this relationship?
I know what you told you my problem was. I have a completely different problem.
Like, this is a sham, bro. Like, yeah, it's a problem, but like
Yeah.
that can wait another day.
But yeah, so I continued being a shitty person until I went through an apathetic period, and I just didn't give a crap anymore, and I just kind of broke it off. Fast forward to many years again, and I'm going through some other issues, which I don't want to dive into just yet. I guess I don't want to jump too far ahead. Going through some PTSD type stuff, and it got to a point where it was affecting my life, affecting my work. It was hard to function, and so I finally decided, again, being hard headed and waiting until I got to the point where like it was that bad before going and getting help. And now I see a guy every week. It's helped tremendously, given me a lot of tools on how to deal with things. It's not a cure. It's not an instant fix. Chris, go see a freaking shrink, okay? Like, it's just like everybody should do it. I think if you don't have a lot of issues going on, you feel like you're okay, talk to him once a month. You know what I mean? Like, but if you look at yourself and you're like, no, I've definitely got some stuff going on, like, talk to someone. Talk to him a week. I started out twice a week. Yeah, it can cost money, but like, what's more important? Eating out, and ordering in, McDonald's or whatever, or being happy with your life. So you have to figure out, what it is to make that happen. But off that, I talked to someone now. Go see him tomorrow, actually, and it has helped tremendously, and I recommend everybody do it.
One of the things that I did notice when I was looking at this topic is men are less likely to have mental health issues than women, but women are more likely to get treatment, and men have more suicide rates, higher suicide rates than women. And
By
I
a
think a lot
lot.
of it, yeah, I think a lot of that does come back to the fact that, we talked about it in the masculinity episode. Go back and check that one out. But we hold a lot of things inside. We don't talk about things. It's not manly to talk about our feelings. And the reason I asked about talking to our friends, because even with, a lot of group of friends that we'll have and we'll consider them close, we don't really bring up a lot of the issues that we really do have. And we don't really discuss things because we don't want to be looked at differently, because we have an isolating issue, and we don't want to be our perception going forward. Even once that issue is resolved, it can be like, oh, there's that guy with that thing. And so that stigma is there, I think, a lot. And that's what uh, a lot of push has been now in the media with men and mental health, is just talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't hide it. Don't act like we're not going through anything, because we all go through stuff, may it be big or small. Those are things that we have to discuss and not hide that. And that's, I guess, a good thing for this podcast with this Be Honest Man. We're bringing these things to light that people are going through every day. You probably have a friend right now who's listening to this and is going through something. You don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And if, like you said, if you do look a little bit closer or have those hard discussions, you'll probably know that there's a lot more going on.
It's one of those things where even if you can't help, point them in the right direction. Like
Yeah.
there's been times where people have brought things up to me, or I've been made aware of something, I've noticed something, and I'm not equipped for it. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to solve every problem that everybody has. I think one of the biggest strengths is realizing where somebody else can be more helpful than you can. And so
Absolutely.
pointing them in that direction instead of trying to solve everything for them is really, really big. And, letting them know and letting yourself know that it's okay to talk to somebody, to seek help, and then also to recognize when some people aren't being helpful, and to not listen to certain people or to take advice from them. And you can appreciate their goodwill or intention, but also recognize that they're talking out of their butt and they don't know about it, and as an example, when I was going through the grief of my ex Polina dying, that was by far not even close the hardest thing that I've ever gone through my entire life. Now, I'd been lucky enough to not really lose anybody close to me. Up until this point, I had not lost anybody close to me, never anybody who I had been intimate with, things like that. And, people want to help, but it's hard to do because nothing will actually help. In my opinion, like talking to people, all that sort of stuff can help, but like there isn't a fix. And even little things would kind of eat at you, and people would be trying to help, but they wouldn't recognize that them being like, how are you? Are you okay? Like, no, I'm clearly not okay. And you asking that is just aggravating me because I am also easily, like, I'm irritable because of these emotions, because of these sorts of things. And I mean, I guess the point with that, because, eventually I want to talk about that situation and all the things I went through. But the point of just bringing it up right now is that, again, you don't always have to be the person who solves that problem. Like, I did get a therapist and I did talk to somebody, and I would talk to some people, but some people just felt like were trying to help me, and they just didn't have a place to or know how. And they just felt that they needed to, and it didn't help. At times it was aggravating. And I think having that self-awareness to be like, I can't actually help you in this. Reach out and say, if there's something I can do, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to let you kind of be in your spot. And then we'll get into it, because some people didn't do that. They didn't take no for an answer, and it was also amazing. So it's very confusing when it comes to
That's
that sort of thing.
definitely a very tough subject. And I mean, you're right. Even if it's like, just like, hey man, how you doing today? You know what I mean? Like, that little bit can either do nothing or it can mean the world.
Mhm.
There is no cut and dry like answer. Like, so in my, firefighters are notorious, they're well known for being very open about their feelings. It's a lie. They're not. We do not talk. It has been a thing. We see a lot of messed up stuff. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about feelings. Nobody talks about emotions. It's just kind of been, that's just the way we run. Especially in a department like mine, where we do fire and EMS. We do both of those jobs, and in both of those jobs, you see a lot of messed up stuff. And to combat this, we have a team. It's either called the SISM team or the peer-to-peer team. SISM is Critical Incident Stress Management. It kind of fulfills both those roles. Critical Incident Stress Management is we will come and try and be there for you after a very tough scene. Typically, most of that these days is usually with kids dying or a mass casualty event, or someone, getting hurt on the job, like someone you work with getting hurt, injured, or killed. And then peer to peer is essentially just saying, like, if you need someone to talk to at work who is at your level, we have a list of us in every station. That's what we're there for. We're not paid anything extra to be here. There's no benefit to us being on the team whatsoever. Like, it's solely people who want to be there to be there. And I've actually been. It's funny because I'm kind of, as always, a lot of my friends in cross shifts and stations are the nerdier folks. We kind of always attract to each other, the kind of outcasts. And so I purposely wanted to be in on this for those guys. They're not going to be super comfortable going to the super macho guy who has nothing in common with them. But a guy like me who's just kind of, I don't know, kind of just chill and unassuming, but also they know is kind of in the same level as them, like, with background and being a nerd, whatever, it helps a lot of those guys to be able to have someone like that to talk to. And it's just having people know you're there makes a big difference. Like, you don't have to be up their butt, you don't have to constantly ramming it down their throat, but like, just the awareness that, like, hey, there is somebody here, just saying, hey, if you need something, just let me know.
Yeah. I
You
think
know?
that's, that sums up the point. Is some people would push a little bit hard, some people weren't there, which that can hurt too. And then, it's the people that maybe try too hard. Some people don't try hard enough. And at the same time, you're just so irritable that everything seems a bit more extreme probably than
Yeah.
than it should or could be. So, I don't want to. I know, Chris, now you've told parts of your story twice, and then we've like taken, kind of digested that part, and then talked a bunch of different stuff with it. Is there more to your story?
I mean, I think I covered the big parts. I guess just to kind of stay with the topic that we're talking about right now, I know that when I was younger, all I wanted was for someone to reach out to me.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted like one person to ask me if I was okay. That would have helped
Yeah.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Never got it.
Yeah. It just wasn't made, like, these days. I mean, I don't know how high school kids are. Maybe they're still shitty. But these days, I just think that we're more culturally aware, and maybe there would be that person, or maybe it'd be just the guidance counselors are more educated, or maybe the teachers who might notice, like, oh, okay, let me reach out to Chris. You know, um, I was lucky that I kind of had that when I was in middle school. I went to two different middle schools. At the first one I went to, there was actually a guidance counselor who was mocked by everybody, but was the nicest guy in the world. And he would actually notice when I was in a really bad place, a really bad mood, and would talk to me. Now I was hanging out with the wrong people and thought I was just hard as shit. You know what I mean? And I would just kind of blow him off. But looking back, like I wish I would have like talked more to that guy because he genuinely cared. He saw and he recognized, and I hope that there is someone like that out there for everybody.
Hopefully, we can be that for those who are around us, and we also take notice.
Yeah,
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. You got to not be afraid to say something. You're not going to hurt people's feelings if all you got to do is go and say, when you see them alone from it, is, hey man, are you good? Like I just want to make sure you're good. That's all. Like nothing more to it. You don't have to do nothing else. Is everything all right?
yeah.
Leave it in their
That's all
court
it
in a
takes.
degree. So to
Yeah.
tie this in my situation, since we've kind of gone around, like Sean, you did yours, Chris, you did yours, and I briefly talked about mine. So because that's going to tie into a point I'm going to make. So now I'm just going to give my situation. So I haven't been the person. There were times that I was sad in my life. There were times that I thought I might have been depressed in my life. I also had breakups when I was young, or some girl who I never dated when I was in high school who decided to date a different guy, and I thought that was the worst thing I'd ever go through my entire existence, right? We've all had those situations where we were in love with a girl and she didn't notice us and all that. We're the literally main character in a movie. But so I went through all of that, but I never just was like always I'm sad. Things were always pushing me to the edge and stuff. So I don't have that exact same experience. Again, had moments where I was let down. I felt like I didn't have friends, or I felt like I was the oddball out, the dude people joked on, whatever it might be growing up. And so despite all that, the big struggle that I had in my life was always dealing with how I fall out of interest in relationships, which was briefly mentioned in the last podcast. And again, hopefully we'll dive deeper into in another podcast, but I can't seem to stay in relationships. I get into them and I just lose it. I become super apathetic. Like I feel what is described as depression because I have no interest. The same things don't excite me. I don't feel joy about seeing that significant other, anything like that, but I want to. And that's what causes this just anguish within me, like genuinely torn up because I'm like, I want to be happy. I want this person to be happy. I'm not happy like in this. I don't feel this. And then they're sad about it. It leads to these things. And some of the saddest moments of my life were the breakups and the times of me trying to let them know. I remember being in tears with some of these women multiple times in college with Megan and stuff where I'm just like, I don't know why I can't feel. Like, I just don't understand it. But that's like my only experiences with stuff like that up until in 2020 where I had dated Polina for about a year and we went our separate ways, and that had happened during our relationship. I went to a counselor, I went to a therapist about it during our relationship, and it didn't end up leading and where she wanted our relationship to move faster and further, and for us to actually add, after a year she wanted to know that there was more to it. I wasn't showing that. Ultimately we broke up. And then about 8 months later I get a text from her best friend here in the States that was just like, Polina died in a car accident. And initially the shock had, kind of like set in, and I wasn't like super sad. I was just like, what the heck? Like, what do you mean? And so I remember texting Sean, I remember texting Chris, and within about 24 hours, it hit me like a truck that this person that I had felt really strongly for. And, I always say, and, a member from my stream brought it up the last time because I was explaining how this girl I recently talked to, I wasn't, the same thing happened to me. And I always have this thing where I just lose interest and I don't whatever. And with people I'm with, and he was like, well, you loved one of them, I know for a fact. And, I would say that that's true. I never said it. I never verbally said that I loved Polina, but the anguish that I felt at her death and the path that it put me on made me realize that there was something. There was love there because it left a hole in me that is still there to this day. And so going through that, like I said, it was shock, and then it started to set in, and it didn't start to let up. And by let up, it's just like it wasn't a constant nearly every moment of every day, 8 months, 9 months, something like that. Before it was like better, but still there. And that was my first real experience with depression where it was consistent. It was constant. I cried basically every day for 8 months. Not an exaggeration. I was trying to cope. I started to see a therapist about that specifically. And it's hard because you want to talk to people about it, but you don't want to openly, like, I found myself that was all I wanted to talk about. And you would bring it up and people wouldn't know what to say. Even your friends. Like, I could bring it up to Chris. I could bring it up to Sean. I could, and I'd say things about her and there would be silence in return because people don't know what to do. Like, what can they say? How can they help you? And I remember going through a lot of this, and somebody who I don't really talk to anymore, but a friend of mine, Tracy, who basically didn't take no for an answer. I was real down, and I was just like, I don't know, I'm just like walking around my block or something like that. I just needed to get out. And she was just like, stop, stay there. I'm coming over. Didn't ask for it, did nothing. She was like, I'm coming to be with you. And she sat on the couch and just listened to me cry and talk about stuff for like 2 hours. And that meant the world to me, right? We don't talk. We're not exactly friends right now. And I will forever be grateful for the fact that she didn't take no for an answer. She knew I was down. She knew I was out. And she was like, no, we're going to, even if you don't want to talk to me, I'm going to be there sitting next to you in case you do want to, in case you do. And I think that, and it's hard because there's no right answer. On one hand, we're saying like, don't force it, don't whatever. And then on the other hand, it's like, God, did that feel good? And God will always remember that because she would not let me sit by myself and wallow. She gave
She'll
me,
break down that barrier.
yeah, she broke it down. She was, I was putting up a barrier and she was like, no, this wall's not coming up. Like, whatever. And she didn't set any sort of, you have to talk to me, anything. She was like, I'm going to be there. You're either going to talk to me or you're not. But like, you're not sitting alone right now, And so going through all of that opened my eyes up to what it's like. And the idea that some people out there just feel that way all the time. And I it's probably not the exact same, right? Grief, depression, all that sort of jazz, probably not identical. But they certainly share similarities, and experiencing that opened my eyes to a lot of these sort of mental health things that I didn't have a great grip on before, you know, uh, because no matter how badly I didn't want to feel that way, I felt that way. And that's kind of what like people with depression and some of these other things are. They can, with all their might, not want to feel that sadness, but you can't make yourself not feel that sadness to a degree. I couldn't make myself forget that hole. I couldn't make myself stop having the memories flooding to me. I couldn't make myself not having the regrets, like all of that sort of jazz. And so I did go see a therapist, and it was helpful just to have somebody who would listen to what I had to say no matter what. And shout out to this lady, because at the time I didn't have insurance, so I had to stop going to a therapist I had seen initially, and she outright was like, okay, how much can you give me? And I was like, $20. She was like, deal. And I gave her $20 cash once a week, and that was totally fine, totally cool. Like, that was it. So shout out to her.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was super awesome. She was like, I know you need somebody. And she was like, I can't do it for free, but how much could you give? And I was like, $20. And so that's what we did. And it was helpful. I'm not saying that it was like the thing that solved it, because nothing solves it. And I still get sad to this day. But to have somebody who will listen, who you can go in and you can lay everything out there and can provide some tips, some tricks, some things, to different viewpoints, different ways to look at loss and grief, and how to cope and how to get through those things, was really helpful. And I'm just glad that I've always been open enough that I'm willing to do something like that. Going to a therapist doesn't scare me. Talking to somebody doesn't scare me. And I know that's not for everybody, but I'm lucky that that is how I am, because I do see the value in it, and I do find it to be very helpful for a lot of things. So,
and I definitely think that the therapist thing, like, it's not a fix. It's not a, okay, now what they do is they provide you tools. And
good therapists.
Yeah. So a good therapist is going to provide you with the tools to help mitigate a lot of the stuff you're going through. They're not going to try and fix it. They're not going to, they know that's not how it works. But it can give you some tools to help you cope, and to kind of make it so that you can perform in your daily life without it destroying you.
I do just want to reiterate that not everyone that you talk to is going to be the most helpful.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're just talking to friends or acquaintances. They may mean well, but I know personally, I did have friends when I was going through hard times. Their solution was for me to just get drunk with them.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Because that was another thing I spent a lot of time doing in my late teenage years and my early 20s. I did a lot of drinking to try and cope, and that it's not the way to do it.
Hmm.
So just
No.
not everyone is going to be,
The
not
best
everyone means
influence.
well
Yeah.
when they want to help.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I guess I'm lucky in a way. And at the time, sometimes I felt unlucky because I didn't want to feel. And I thought, man, if I just drank or if I just smoked or if I just, something,
I've
maybe
been
that would
there.
help. But as somebody who has never drank and never smoked, never done drugs or whatever, I don't have those sorts of outlets or vices. So, in one way, I think that's one spot where it shined through because I didn't then just lean into one of these things, these substances, and just fall into the trap of just using that and doing that.
No, I've
So,
definitely. It's crazy because me and Steven have we're the same. I've never drunk, never done drugs, never done any of those things. But there have been times, even now, there are times where like I will be in such a deep hole that I'm like I'll literally be in the kitchen cooking with my wife, and I was like, I wish I drank. Like I wish I could just drink myself into oblivion right now. Like I just wish like I'm using sake to cook with, and like I just want to drink this. Like, but I just know that like I will never. There is zero possibility for me to ever have a healthy relationship with alcohol. I know that it's just having never touched the stuff. I know that it would be impossible for to have a healthy relationship with it. So I will never do it. I just know that it's something I won't ever do. So it's
Yeah,
yeah.
substance abuse is another aspect of mental health. Substance abuse disorder is a thing, and it is a lot more common among men because we do find drinking socially acceptable. Having a cold one with the boys, it's always advertised for every any kind of game or sporting event. You got to have a beer, you got to sit
Mm-hmm.
down with a cigar, and it just becomes an outlet for men to talk and kind of get together because for some reason a lot of us men can't get together and talk about what's going on in our life without a cold beer in our hand.
That we never
Uh,
talk about anything real, anyways.
yeah, but they'll sit down and have a couple beers and be like, "Oh, bro, let me tell you about this girl," or "Let me tell you about what's going on at home." But it takes that abuse of that substance to open that door for a lot of people. So, which is not healthy.
no, not at
Um,
all. And
Wow.
that's something we're trying to combat in a way with this is whether liquid courage, right? That's where people start to talk about the things they're going through when they're drunk and they're getting a
oh yeah,
little the tears start rolling and stuff. And you know that's not the bst time to try to deal with it.
no.
So
Let's get
getting
it
people
out
to be
now.
more open, yeah, we're all sober here. So, we're talking about these things and some of these, we're hearing for the first time, right? Like, I don't know everything about Chris's story. I didn't know anything about Sean's. He's my brother, so being open, being honest with people, anybody listening to this can do that. Whether it's professional, whether it's a friend, family, whatever that might be, you can certainly get out there and talk to people as well. And whether you're dealing with depression, substance abuse, whatever sort of mental, situation you're going through right now.
So another mental health aspect is anxiety, and I actually experienced a little bit of that. And so that was my wife brought it up to me when we were discussing doing this podcast, and I was like, I don't really have much to contribute, and she's like, Oh, yes, you do. So I've always been the roller coaster guy. Love theme parks, love any thrills. I've done skydiving, all kinds of stuff.
Oh,
I
that
just
sounds
love it.
terrible.
I love
Yep.
it. It's great. Um,
No.
so there was one day I got on Alpengeist, and that is a roller coaster here in Busch Gardens, Virginia, and or Williamsburg, Virginia, excuse me. But I got on the roller coaster, and it's a over the chest harness that clamps down. So I set the harness to my comfortability with it still locking, of course. Well, the kid comes by and puts all of his weight on it and just clicks it in one more time. I have asthma, so when he clicked that down, I felt that weight of having an asthma attack on my chest. I could not compress my chest. He had pushed it in to the point where I could not breathe. So I'm slapping on the harness and trying to get the guy's attention, and they don't notice. So they just let it go, and the whole ride, I'm like, I'm gonna die on this thing because I can't breathe because his chest harness is so clamped onto my chest. And then I was able to manage and I got through that ride. But after that, I definitely had some anxiety and phobia of chest harness roller coasters. Didn't ride them for the longest time. And I never really thought about it, but that was the reason why. And I had never really experienced anything like that because, like I said, I had never had the mental health thing. So I never really understood why your brain would let you not do something that you enjoy doing and
Hmm.
not want to do something. And there's a couple of different roller coasters that are at Busch Gardens, like the Griffin and a couple of other ones, and the Mock Tower, where it drops you down. I love those things, but it
There's
took
chest
a
harnesses.
chest harness, and now I realized I was like, nah, I don't want to ride that. I'll ride something else. Let's go ride Verbolten.
Yeah, I'm just not feeling it, you
Yeah,
know.
it's not. Let's go. Let's do something else. So that was my little part with, I guess, with mental health, dealing with anxiety,
Which was kind
and
Anxiety
of
is definitely
that's almost like a PTSD sort of thing, right? Like
definitely
that your PTSD caused the anxiety, right? You went through that and it lingered, and how it what is the word? How it like came about into
like
fruition was through
manifested. Yeah,
anxiety. Yeah, manifested itself was through
yeah. It's just
anxiety.
you kind of create an anxiety about it.
I've
I'm
since
gonna
gotten over that, but
that's good.
it
So Alvin
it
guys, next
took
time
a
we go.
while. Let's do it.
Nah, I'm good. I
The
don't
funny
like
thing
it.
was, it took my nephew. We went down to Legoland in Florida, and my nephew is all about my brother-in-law. Whatever he's excited about, he's excited about. So he wanted to get on these roller coasters, and hey, guess what? There are some chest harness roller coasters there. But my little 6-year-old nephew was like, "Let's go!" And I'm looking at him like, "All right, here we go." But
If I start screaming and crying, it's your fault.
yeah,
If a child asks you to do something, you do it.
a grown man on a child's ride screaming and crying while the little
Yeah.
kid's having the time of his life.
One thing I want to mention, and that's because we're on the Be Honest Man podcast. I'm going to be honest. Is so anxiety is one that I think like what you felt was a genuine fear and anxiety that was induced by a traumatic experience that you had.
Yes.
A lot of people claim to be anxious or they have anxiety these
Yeah.
days, and it is simply getting nervous about things that everybody gets nervous about.
True.
Like, public speaking, people be like, I have anxiety, I can't do it. It's like, no, you're nervous to do it, like
Yes.
everybody else is.
There's
You
a
know,
difference.
stuff there is, and that's my main point, is that there's
Yeah.
a difference, and everybody these days, it feels that you can't walk 10 feet without somebody being like, I have anxiety, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
you are anxious.
Yeah.
You are nervous
Anxiety
about a situation.
be an
Anxiety is
irrational
different.
fear.
Yeah, an irrational, like your body, like tenses, like it. You literally have to fight it, sort of like that's having anxiety, to my understanding. Not just I'm
there's
nervous
different
for
levels
something.
to it, man. It's not always something triggered and brought on like that. I mean, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Like everything these days, so many things are overdiagnosed, but there's also things that are underdiagnosed.
Again, I'm not, but and with saying that, like I understand where you're coming from. I'm not trying to take away. I'm trying to actually add to the folks who genuinely have anxiety
Yeah.
or have depression. And you have people out there, for instance, me, I never said I had depression, right? Even when I was going through that experience, I didn't classify as that. I had grief, an immense amount of grief that had depression as like one of the things. But I just feel like every time somebody goes through a sad experience, they're depressed. And it's like, no, you're sad. And by giving it the label of depression, I think you could potentially harm yourself because now you're making that who you are. You are depressed.
Well,
Sadness
a
is
lot of
something
people
that can
do
come and
like
go.
putting themselves in boxes
I agree
these
with that,
days.
but
And
that is something that I think is a problem. I think that
Yeah.
could be a mental illness of it in its own.
Yeah.
Is people who are obsessed with putting negative things in their life or about them, labeling themselves to an
Yeah.
extent to where like they're trying to build this sort of thing, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
healthy.
I
Yeah,
mean,
it
there's
can be a
different
personality
types.
trait.
Because
Yeah.
there's different types of anxiety. Like I go on patients all the time, and it's just my wife and a lot of patients I run have a similar thing where like, well, I should say my wife's a different case. So like a lot of patients I have like, there's some they have kind of this thing where it triggers and they have anxiety attacks, even if they don't really have a history of it. It's just this spiral, and it builds and builds and builds on itself to the point where they are breathing so rapidly that they will pass out and they cannot get under control. Like I mean, and it'll come on to people who have never had that issue before, and it feels like they're dying. Like
Mhm.
most of the time you go on these, they're convinced they're dying because they're not used to dealing with something like
Yeah,
this.
panic attacks and anxiety attacks are super real.
And funny story, I went on a girl here not long ago. She was in high school. She went to Bethel High School. So I was talking to her, and trying to calm her down, or just, it's one of those things. I'm like, everyone else get out of the room. We're gonna sit here. We're gonna chill out. You're gonna talk. I'm gonna talk to you. You don't have to talk to me. I'm gonna ask you questions. If you want to answer them, you don't have to. Whatever. But my main thing is just coaching on the breathing. In through your nose, hold it out through your mouth. You're sniffing the roses, blowing out the candles. We're doing this thing. And I get through asking her questions like, "What's your name?" Where do you go to high school? Already know the answer. Whatever. I was like, "Oh, I went to the other high school. Whatever. Blah blah blah." I was like, "What year were you born?" And she was like, 2007. And I was like, "Don't tell me that. Do not tell me you were born in 2007. I graduated high school in 2007." And she started laughing. Now, it didn't really help the anxiety attack, but it gave us a little break. But I was also pissed off at her. But no, like legitimately, like there's these anxiety attacks, panic attacks are they typically will resolve themselves eventually. Typically.
Mm-hmm.
Now there can be bad things that can happen because of that. But they either figure out what it is to calm down or they pass out. Which can lead to its own things.
I know
But then
people. There was a person
like,
I know who like slapping them in the face is the best way to get them out of.
Yeah, I
panic
can't
attack.
do that. I'm not going to do that to a patient.
Yeah.
That would be really bad.
I just know that that's
He's
like a
too
legit
strong.
thing because it can trigger like something like that triggers like the flight or fight response that'll
No, I
like
get it.
kick them
Yeah.
out of it. So like I knew somebody and she was like, if I have a panic attack, just slap me in the face
Bro,
like hard.
no. So like, but my wife, for instance, like she is someone whose anxiety is always like her brain is always going to the worst possible scenario. Like it took her so long to deal with what I do for a living because every day she was convinced like I wasn't coming back, and she would spiral into these panic attacks um fairly often about that and a lot of other things. And she sees a therapist and she's got much better about it, but that is like something that there wasn't one particular thing that like scarred her and now she has anxiety. It's just the way her brain works. It's just constantly going and constantly causing her anxiety. And a
Mhm.
lot of people are like that. Some people are like Indy, where they had something happen and now it's like, I'm really not feeling those fucking chest harnesses. Like like most things, there's so much variance that we can't say for sure one thing or the other. I get what you're saying, that a lot of people always want a label. They want some way to identify with some sort of community, that sort of thing. And so, like, if you can get diagnosed with anxiety or, depression or something, they can use it as a label. Well, there are people out there. But
But the thing is, they're
I
not
would
getting
never
diagnosed.
assume.
They're self-diagnosing.
Either way, like, I would never try and combat someone on that because it's not worth it. There's no point in fighting them on that label. If that's how they want to live their life, that's how they're going to live their life. But by trying to disparage it, you risk disparaging or making the people who legitimately have problems feel disparaged or doubt their own. Because as I'll get into at some point, I don't want to keep talking it for this long. Like, people will try to like convince themselves that they don't have an issue, not necessarily because they think they're better than that, or because sometimes they're not worthy of having an issue. I'll explain it more, but it's really weird thing. But yeah, that's all. I just wanted to say, like, the anxiety thing is a tricky subject that has so much variance in it that there's no one clear thing, at least not in my clinical experience. There's not one clear way to say, oh, this is anxiety, this isn't.
No, and I know it's not that black and white, but I also, and I think everybody agrees widely that there's an overabundance. People just claim stuff to claim
Oh
stuff,
yeah, for sure.
and to be
For
like,
sure, for sure.
like basics to like, I have anxiety. I don't want to swim with sharks. Like, yeah, me either, dude. Like, that's scary. Like, that's not anxiety. That is your life being like, hey, dude, like, let's think about this for a second. Sharks might eat you. So I feel like I see that a lot where it's like basic stuff that like nobody likes doing. And it's claimed as like, I have anxiety, like a disorder. And it's like, did your doctor tell you that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we can
So-
move on.
So there's a couple things I want to dive into that I might get a little long-winded on. And so is there anything else that we want to talk about on this before I get into this kind of diatribe?
Which part are you trying to do, like PTSD and stuff like that?
So there's two things I wanted to talk about, being imposter syndrome and PTSD. So imposter syndrome, I know, is something I deal with a lot. I'm Even if you don't know what it is, I'm going to say that at least one of you has probably dealt with it in some capacity. Does anyone have anything to say on that?
Imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean,
It's a
I
good-
think
good
at some point,
discussion
I would
yeah.
like for you to explain it to me.
So, the way I see it is knowing. So, like, for instance, I have a lot of qualifications in the job that I do. I've been doing it for a good long while. I'm respected by the people I work with for being good at my job. I am someone who's seen and as someone who can train new people because of all of those things. And I will still go to work and feel like I am not good enough to do my job, and that at some point someone's going to find me out. That at every day I have the fear that someone's going to realize that I am none of those things and that I am not worthy to be where I'm at. That's my that's how I deal with
I've
it.
dealt with that in
and
almost
stuff.
every job I've been in, where I've
Yeah.
been like, wait, am I actually good enough to do this? Like, am I skating by? Like, how? Like, almost every job, I'm just like, am I really like? There's not somebody better they could have to do this job, sort of thing. I
Yeah.
get that, but then I also at a point, I've had walls taken down where like I've worked with people who are like these big people and these whatever, and then you work with them, you're like, oh, they're just people.
Yeah.
They're not some heroic super giga brain, just like computing everything, and their just ideas are so much further out there in advance. And it's like, they're just people too. We're all just people trying to do the job. So that's
Oh, yeah.
helped me with it, is realizing like that dude makes mistakes. He didn't come up with every idea that's ever been invented. Like I've brought things up and they've gone, oh, dude, that's freaking genius. And I'm like, wait, nice, like, and that helps me with that. But I've definitely felt like that in almost every role that I've had.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced a little bit of that. And like you said, getting into the job, getting into the role, realizing other people around you, like you said, are just human. And you're like, once you're on that same level as the people you were looking up to, and once you get on that level, you're like, wait a minute,
Mm.
it's not that bad. It's not that bad. And everybody's
Yeah.
just, like you said, just trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think it's something that everybody deals. I think that a lot of people deal with it. So that's why I didn't want to just kind of not mention it, because it is definitely. I mean, it's definitely a mental health aspect. That it's fear. Of being found out for being a fraud. That's something that no one else thinks you're a fraud at. Everyone else thinks you're good at what you do.
Yeah.
But there's just that part of you that is convinced that like you're gonna walk into work and they're gonna all turn and look at you and be like, "Oh, we got you now. We figured it out."
We were just waiting on for the right time.
He's a
Yeah.
phony, a big fat phony.
He's not even a real firefighter.
So that's the imposter syndrome summed up, Chris.
Thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I do know with the top 5 things, mental health issues for men, depression being number 1, anxiety, substance abuse disorder also up there. PTSD is one of the top 5. And I know we were going to touch on that a little bit as well. They said at least 60% of men have experienced at least one trauma in their lives, whether it's an injury, witnessing an injury, physical assault, combat. It's not just a military vet thing, and
Yeah.
people deal with it differently. Sometimes PTSD can lead to some of these other things of anxiety, depression, substance abuse. So those are some of the things that people deal with PTSD.
Well, I think of the four of us, I mean, Sean's the one who's actually had experience with this, and I think that's one of the big things he wanted to touch on. So,
Yeah, so I know a couple of us have talked about stuff and got nearly on the verge of tears. I will 100% cry talking about this. Like, I'm just being open and honest. It's happened every time thus far. I'm already tearing up thinking about it. So, there's been a couple times, and just to kind of throw it out there. So, they say that there is post-traumatic stress, and then there's post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is typically if it lasts a month or over a month and has effect up to severe effects on your life, just normal life functioning. But anyways, so my earliest run-in kind of with post-traumatic stress, I had a call earlier on in my career here in the department I work for. There were some screwed up calls I had before at other departments, that really kind of stuck with me, that I can still see, but they didn't really keep me up at night. There was a call I went on, and I think it was the relation. So I had a young guy in the Navy. He was my brother's age at the time, and he was sitting there. He was playing Xbox, and I was playing Call of Duty to be specific. The Xbox controller was still on, the Turtle Beaches were still on the table, and my man picked up a Glock and he put a shot right through his head, just sitting right there. And we worked him because I was new and no one above me was able to make a decision on calling it, and we shouldn't have worked him. I mean, he was DOA, but we did it anyways. But I remember getting out of the medical when we got there, and there's this woman downstairs who I assumed was like his girlfriend or wife or something, and she's just begging me to help him. And I had no idea what I was walking into yet. But she's just begging me to help him. We walk upstairs and we find that, and his body's not figured it out yet. You know, like he's not there anymore, but his body's still breathing every couple seconds. It's not a sustainable thing, and it would stop for periods of time, then start back up, and then the body's really weird when it's dying, so especially when the brain's involved. So anyways, that one kept me up at night for a while. But I didn't really talk about it too much. I didn't really do anything about it. I didn't see a therapist. But that one really stuck with me for quite a while. I think it was just the relation, he's just sitting there playing. He's like, like I said, he's my brother's age, he's close to my age too, and he's just sitting there playing Xbox, man. And so it's just stuck close to home, I guess. And but I can still visually remember everything about the call. The lights reflecting off the brick and the glass, her walking out and talking to me, the people in the stairway, the blood. I got covered in his blood because we had to carry him down these very, very narrow flights of stairs, and all of the blood kept pouring out of his head. It covered me. I was covered from my chest down into my boots. But yeah, that one stuck for a while, but eventually, I could still, like I said, I'd still vividly remember it. But it didn't really bother me anymore. I was able to get back to normal functioning, things like that. Saw lots of other suicides have always hit me really hard. I think because I've just been so close to that at certain parts in my life that maybe and it's just sad. It's so incredibly sad to witness, especially, I mean, at any age. I've seen everything from, people that young, in their early 20s to, 70-year-olds, take their own lives. And it's not easier in any aspect. Yeah, there's lots of other calls that I remember pretty vividly, bad stuff that happened, but I'm usually the calm one on the scene. As I got more experience, I'm usually the kind of voice of reason, the person who kind of keeps their stuff together. And we were pulling into the station one time, and I had my rookie at the time. Brittany was a rookie at the time. I had 2 volunteers. My department is a really weird volunteer system. They're just like college kids who get a ride time to get for their degrees. They're doing pre-doc, what do you call it? Pre-med. And it's part of that. And we get called out for a pedestrian accident. And I look at the notes and I immediately know, I looked at Brittany and I said, this is going to be bad. I just want you to mentally prepare. Like, this is going to be a bad scene. And what it had happened was someone was turning right onto a busy road, and there was a girl and her mom crossing the street, and it's at dusk. And I guess they didn't see them, and they turned, and they ran the girl over. She was 14. Completely crushed her. We were the first ones on scene. Her mom was just holding her hand as she got run over. And so her mom was obviously, extremely upset and screaming. And there was we live near Air Force Base, and there was an Air Force guy there, and he was like, he was the first person I talked to, and he's like, everyone has asked me to do CPR, I just didn't think I should. And I took one look at her, and I was like, no, you made the right decision. You're good. And I went over, and I was just like, at this time, the engine was showing up, and the officer was getting off, and he's visibly freaking out. I'm like, give me a sheet. And he's just looking around like, what are we, what's going on? And I was like, just get me a sheet. I might have cussed at him. But eventually I do, and I put the sheet over and I cover up because there's nothing to be done. And we ended up treating the mom. She eventually passed out from the terror of it all, and we had a little kind of meeting afterwards. But the problem with those critical incident stress meetings is that no one wants to talk, especially in a group, and especially that close to an event. So nothing. I mean, we kind of go on. I didn't really think about it all that much. It didn't really bother me for a long time. I mean, this probably over a year, almost 2 years. I never thought about it. We talked about it occasionally. It was really messed up. And suddenly I started, I would say, I mean, it was probably close to 8 to 12 months ago. I started just having these kind of issues where I was just sitting there. I would just get so sad and I would just be crying and I would tear up and I just couldn't figure out why. I was like, whatever. And it kept happening more and more often. And then it was happening and I was seeing things. I was seeing scenes and calls I'd been on, and like I could not. There were some intrusive thoughts that I could not get away from. I could not make them stop. And I would just sit there and I would just cry, and I had have to call out of work because I couldn't function. Like I literally could not stop what was going on. And again, being hard headed, I was like, I'm good. I can manage this. Well, then it would happen for days at a time. And I started to realize, you know, maybe not, but I'm just going to continue. I think it'll get better. And one day we were coming back from going for a walk, and it was right around dusk. And we're sitting at an intersection, and we were sitting at the light, and there's two girls standing at the crosswalk waiting to go. And you can see they're antsy and they're not sure what they're gonna do, and they it doesn't change. They just take off, man. They just take off across the road, and I freaked out. Oh man, it's like I had an episode. I was screaming and crying, and I was just in sheer terror. I don't know that I've ever been more scared in my life. And I realized, like, no, legit, I've got a problem. Like, I might actually have like genuine issues. And so, I kind of serendipitous. Like, well, I say that like several weeks went by, months went by, and I looked, and I just couldn't find anybody that I felt like was gonna. I'm very picky with who I talk to, and I didn't want to find just some typical run of the mill person who's just gonna not who wasn't going to understand, who hasn't really ever seen shit, you know? But as part of the peer to peer team, I was actually taking a class on suicide awareness. And they had some guy, one of the ladies putting it on was part of the clinic. And one of the guys who was sitting in with it was part of her clinic. And he was telling about himself. And like he's former military, like Navy intelligence guy, you know, has been in the shit. Like he specializes in military and first responders. Like that's his thing. And I was still going through this. It was getting worse. I was going for weeks of feeling this way. Like I'm at work crying, like, and I just don't know what to do. And I literally just went up to the guy during class, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like tearing up, like talking to him, and I was like, I think I might hit you up. He was like, you really should, and I did, and it's helped tremendously. It's really because I wouldn't. Part of the reason I didn't want to get help because I wouldn't accept it. I said there are people who have seen and experienced much worse than I. There's no way that I have PTSD because like I'm just not, you just don't feel worthy of it. Like you don't feel like, oh, it can't be me. Like there's I'm just being a baby. Like I'm
Yeah.
just being weak.
Like what I went through isn't enough to warrant this sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Even though it met the definitions, even though like it was debilitating at times, you know, it kept me from functioning, you know, in my life, like I still wouldn't accept it. And he obviously he's quick to call me on my bullshit, and you know, every time I was like, well, you know, this and that. He was like, well, do you not experience those things? And it's like, well, yeah, but he's like, no, there's no but. You know, like it's just there's just facts. But yeah, and it's not something. I don't know if it's apparent in my voice. Obviously, it makes it me upset to talk about still, even after dealing with this. You know, seeing him for a couple months now. It's gotten better. It's gotten a lot better. It's not done. It's there's no like we've said multiple times. There's no easy fix to any of this stuff. There's just, I mean, you've just got to get help. That's really the moral of the story. Like if I didn't get help, it would just get worse. It would get worse.
Yeah.
There is none of these things fix themselves. They don't get better on their own. You have to find someone to help.
I think that's a trap a lot of us get caught in is
Yeah.
it'll fix itself. It'll fix itself. It'll just come around. It'll do it. Now, I think that that is common, and I've definitely had that in multiple areas of my life. With my experience, I thought that it would just never get better. I never thought I'd be sitting here having these conversations with you guys without a constant pain inside of me. For 9 months, I couldn't. even just normal conversation, even if I went out with people, even if I laughed, joked, like there was still that there. So I didn't feel it for that instance, but I felt it at other times where you're just like, it'll just fix itself. I'll just feel better. I'll wake up and this will go away. And unfortunately, that's just not how those sorts of things work. And getting
Definitely not.
help is the right call.
It's
Yeah.
also so common for people to think that they shouldn't feel sad or they shouldn't feel depressed because someone else out in the world has it worse than them.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
No, yeah, everybody's in their own truths with what you're feeling, and because somebody else has experienced something somewhere else in the world doesn't negate from what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And PTSD and the diagnosis are actually more common in women than in men. But again, women are more likely to go get treatment as
Yeah.
men sit and suffer in silence because that's the way we think we have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, when the whole, women have more mental health issues and women is just like
They're just probably more
it's
diagnosed because
reported,
they're
right? More
yeah.
reported, more
Yeah.
diagnosed, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Because
So
there's no doubt that both sexes have all of these problems
Yeah.
and have them in, you're going to have tons of PTSD from experiences as a woman. You're going to have tons of different ones, especially when we talk about, a lot of the roles and stuff that men and women have and, the things that they deal with in life, so it could be super traumatic things with like sexual assault for women for PTSD, and it can be war, it can be bodies and death for men and stuff
yeah,
like that, just more commonly. But you get crossover. You're going to have women who have dealt with this, and you're going to have men who have dealt with that. But one I
yeah,
think is more likely to, I guess, be registered or reported or dealt with, and that's
yeah,
women who are more in tune and more socially acceptable for them to go and talk to people and go and get help. I mean, think about
exactly.
it. Just with the people we know, almost every woman is like, yeah, I see a therapist, or I've seen a
Yeah,
therapist, or I regularly go, and most of the guys don't or haven't,
no, yeah.
despite the
They're
fact
just
that,
not getting to that point
yeah.
of
Or
going
it's
to and thinking things are acceptable and talking about things. I know we had talked about it before, but there was the MMA fighter who had lost a friend to suicide,
Hmm.
and he took that chance to use his platform and his podium after his win to tell men to go out, get help, talk to somebody.
Hmm.
Don't hold it in. Don't think you got to suffer in silence, and don't think you got to be some kind of macho guy.
It was something
And
like, I'd rather you cry on my shoulder than I attend your funeral.
Yep.
exactly,
Like, it was one of those things, and that's,
I recommend everyone to go check that out if you haven't seen it. His name's Patty Pimblett.
yeah,
Sure, you can find it on YouTube. It's everywhere right now.
hmm
And it's just one of, hopefully a growing number of like these celebrities that are starting to use their platform to, kind of get rid of the stigma of men not being able to talk about problems.
yeah,
hmm
just stop being hard headed, man. Just do it. I wish I would have done it sooner. But again, I get it. We're all hard headed. We all think we can. The problem is, like, a lot of us think we can fix shit that might is out of our control to fix,
yeah,
or is not even fixable. Like, it's like, again, like, he has just given me tools that have allowed me to mitigate a lot of the issues. It's still there. I still may have to reach out to him. I still have to do things to keep this, I won't say bottled up, but under control, like, every day. And I don't know if that'll ever get better,
Yeah.
because of this or stuff that I see in the future. I still do this line of work. That's the thing, is like, before I saw that call, we were just chilling. We had just eaten tacos and we are like having a good time. And that's the problem with my field, is you could go from the like joyous moments to seeing utter death and carnage in 30 seconds. This call was 50. I could see it from the station. Like, it took me 10 seconds to get there. And so, and there's guilt that comes along with some stuff. Weird guilt. Weird guilt. I never felt bad about calling it. What I've always felt bad about is that I remember visually less about that call than I do other calls. That one has messed me up more mentally than anything else I've ever, combined. And yet I can't recall a lot of what it looked like. But
I
other
wonder if it's
calls I
because
remember,
of how traumatic it was, that like,
it
and
could be.
just that you had to try to step up, like you said, you were like, get me a sheet, that you just had your focus, going in different directions and stuff like that, just
Yeah. Well, our
ideas.
brains are weird. So the way that it kind of works is that our brain goes through these cycles, and especially when we sleep, it sits there and it tries to go through all the things we've seen and dealt with, and it puts it through a filter, and then it sorts it away where it's supposed to go. Like, oh, I had a coffee date. All right, that was fine. I'm gonna throw the filter in here. Well, when there's stuff that the brain doesn't know what to do with, that is traumatic events, like stuff like deaths and just anything that is just traumatic, the brain's like, I don't know what to do with this. It's gonna sit here in the inbox, and I'm not going to do anything with it because I don't know where to filter it. And the problem is, like, it sits there and it grows, or other things attached to it, other events, and you think everything's fine. Then 2 years after that event, all of a sudden it is controlling your life, and you have no idea what happened, what changed. Well, it's because it's just been sitting there the whole time, just waiting and growing and getting stronger. And that's part of the therapist things. They're going to give you tools on how to help you put that through the filter and put it where it needs to go.
With that in mind, so one thing we learned in this episode is that, Chris, you have never gone and talked to a therapist. And we didn't really touch on that other than Sean saying, go talk to a freaking shrink.
Go talk to a therapist, Chris.
Which I will also say, what I want to know is why you have never chosen to go talk to somebody. Because I know that you've had people tell you, I'm assuming, between all of us, between Mika, between, whoever, that's at some point somebody was probably like, have you talked to somebody? So why haven't you?
I don't know. I really don't. There's just, I've just, I'm a man. I'm dumb.
And you got to tough it out.
It has to fix itself, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the way I've always thought about it.
Well, now you know better, right?
You would think so. But, I'll have a bad day again eventually. I know when it's going to be a bad one. And I'll do the same thing I always do, and I'll suck it up. I'll deal with it, and I'll say, maybe I'll see a therapist.
And hear me out. You don't wait for a bad day. You know that those things happen, and you see a therapist now to talk to the therapist about this. That sounds like a W to me. I don't know, Sean. What are you thinking? Is that a W?
I'm thinking that's a big W.
Andy, is that a W?
That is the one underlying thing we've had this entire episode. Just talk to somebody, man.
Yeah.
Get help.
Be honest, man.
Translate that. That's a W. Yeah.
Yeah. What he basically said is you got three
dub.
W's coming from the three of us. If we're on a panel right now, we all hit the golden button. You're going through to the next round.
So the one thing that it was really tough for me when finding a therapist, and that was kind of defeating, is that my first, even though I didn't really choose a therapist or anything like that, like my first running with a therapist wasn't very positive. I didn't feel very good about it. So it was very hard for me to go back and even consider it. Keep in mind that the first person you come across may not be the one for you.
Yeah.
It's like relationships. You're forming a relationship with this person. Yeah, it's professional transaction, sure, but you guys have to be able to click. Like, you have to feel comfortable talking to that person. And I don't want you to be discouraged. That's you, Chris, and everyone listening.
Yeah.
When you go and see someone, and maybe you're just not, it's not going to be like, instant love type of thing. Like, you're instantly comfortable. But like, if you go a couple sessions and you're like, I don't think this person's for me, don't just give up. There are lots of people out there. And some of them are good, some of them are bad.
Just like teachers, right? Saying, some teachers speak to you better. So, no, I'm saying to view it as that, because it's not just you go and they don't work for you and you go, well, I'm screwed. The therapist couldn't solve my problems, or I didn't relate. I felt like I couldn't talk to them, all that. No, find another therapist. There are good and there are bad. And some are still good. They're just not good for you. So you find a different one and you go to that one. I think gone to 4 total therapists over the years. And one was like 1 session. Another one was, 2-3 sessions in college. And then I went to one for a while. And then I went to the other one during the loss. And they had their pros and cons. There was like some that I'd be like, I really enjoy. I think it was helpful. I think that I could open up to them and be honest. And they had advice, but they didn't tell me what to do. And then there were others that approached it slightly differently. And so just to echo Sean's point, and that's all I'm doing here, is don't be discouraged, and also don't blame them. Don't blame you. Just keep going. Find the next therapist that can work better for you. And if it takes you 2 or 3 tries, so be it. It doesn't mean that you're not cut out for it. It just means you got to find the right one, just like anything else. You know, you got a favorite ice cream, that one works for you better. You know, that's a horrific analogy, but you
I
get
mean, that Ben and Jerry's makes a non-dairy what is it? It's like an almond brittle ice cream. That's the one for me, bud. Like if you
That's
guys
the
have it,
therapy he
send it to
needs.
me.
I don't like ice cream.
Look, you need a
Yeah.
therapist or you need ice cream, or you can have a
Yeah.
therapist and ice cream.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what's crazy though. As we're talking about this, and I'm thinking about it, me putting off ever going to a therapist is probably something that I should talk to a therapist about too.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yes.
Well, that's what it was like. Why don't you ever go? And you're like, well, I'll just wait until I'm sad. And then when I'm sad, I'll go, I should do a therapist. And it's like, well, no, like that's not the time because that's when you don't want to act. And that's when you don't want to do things and you're down and get that forward progress going when you can still do that. So
As a car guy, I'm gonna tell you, take care of your preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
Don't wait until your engine's dry and you got no oil in there and your engine's all seized up. Take care of that stuff.
mhm.
Regular maintenance, man, with your body, your mind. Take care of all that stuff
And
regularly.
The other
Yeah,
things
you
that
know,
we
it's
talked about.
astounding how many issues I have.
We all do,
Well,
man.
Yeah. People deal with
We all
them
do.
differently, and some of us have gotten help when you haven't. And then you can look at it and go, wait a second, what's the common theme between them and how they overcome those things? Help, talking to people, seeking
no
those
one gets
things.
through this. No one gets through this stuff alone.
Yeah.
No one.
So, you know, take that step. We talk about, you know, you not having goals or you not really knowing what to do and all that. Also great for a therapist. Also great for those things. Because again, as I said last week, which was referring to the week before that, progress can lead or productivity can lead to progress, right? When you start to work on yourself in one way, you decide, wait, why don't I apply that same thing and start working towards bettering myself here and improving myself there and stepping up in that department and being a better husband and being a better friend and being a better, you know, those sorts of things. And having a therapist, somebody to bounce ideas off of, to talk about things with along that journey can be so helpful. So, Chris, you're going to therapy. Like,
We have decided.
well, we've decided the votes are in. We've counted them up. The tally's there, 3-0. You're going to therapy.
That's
And
it.
everybody's listening, going, "What the heck are we witnessing?"
So,
An intervention.
An intervention, yeah, live.
And to the people listening,
You're going to therapy
you're,
too.
no, like legit,
Yeah.
you should go to therapy. If you're in a situation where you feel like I can't afford it, is it like look online? There are resources out there
Mhm.
for everything to deal with this.
And
So
if you're
just look
if
at
you're
what's in your
employed,
area.
check too. A lot of jobs
Yeah.
are focusing on mental health. I know
Mhm.
with my job, we have a hotline that you can call that is free of charge for all of our associates. It's Resources for Living. They can call up and talk to anybody about anything, whether it be mental health, substance abuse. They can get you help that you need. And
Yeah.
your employers want you to be healthy as well because also you'll be a more productive person.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's a
God,
Look at
win-win.
your workplaces will have a lot of that. That will at least have something to point you in a direction to get help. But just looking around what's available in your area that might be, if you don't have an employer that offers that, there are, every city typically will have some sort of free resource that you may have access to. Is it going to be? Are you going to get an appointment exactly when you want it? No, but you'll be on the road to getting some help. And everybody needs it. Like whether we want to accept it or not, at some point we need help, and it's better to get ahead of it than to try and chase it down.
Definitely.
Well,
So
this
the-
one got pretty deep, and we had some good, just experience sharing and all that, which I hope has, made somebody else feel like, oh, I've gone through something similar, or I'm going through something similar, or just even if they haven't and they have something completely different that they've gone through, that they feel that they can be more open about it, more honest about it, and get help if they need it. And I think something you said earlier was really key about even if you think things are pretty good for you, then just go less, right? But
Yeah.
still go. Have that option, get familiar with it because life isn't perfect. Things are going to happen to you unexpected. You're not always going to know when something bad's going to happen. You almost never will. And when that hits, you'll have that option if you prepare for that sort of thing, and you'll be better equipped to deal with it. And it doesn't mean everything's gonna be perfect. It doesn't mean that, oh, I went to therapy, so now I'll never have to suffer through grief again or anything of the like. Sean, is still going to go through traumatic experiences in the line of work he has, so on and so forth. But it doesn't mean it has to be as hard every time, and it doesn't mean it has to linger to that effect. It's human to feel emotions. It's human to go through things, but it doesn't mean we have to live with them forever at the same level and the same debilitating effect forever. And I think that's one of the big reasons to get help is to be able to learn how to talk these things out, feel these things as a human should, but also know when to kind of let them go and let them impact your life less than they are. The further away from it gets, the less, you're hoping that it's going to impact you. So, any final thoughts from everybody?
I would say the underlying thing, just get help. Don't be a stubborn, toxic masculinity type of person. Go get help if you need it, and don't be ashamed. Let that stigma go.
One thing that we didn't really touch on, we kind of touched on the other way, but sometimes there are going to be people who you want to help, that you try to help, but are not willing to actually fix the issues they're going through. And it is extremely important to not let it become your problem. Especially with someone, a lot of people, myself included, are very empathetic and try and, like, I've put myself in positions to try and help people. I'm currently dealing with a situation with someone who is doing the opposite of helping themselves. They are doing very bad things for their health, no matter how much I try to help them and help them out and put them on the right path, do these things. They just refuse to want to actually fix the problems. They want to blame other things. I can't let that become my issue. I will be there. I will talk to you. I will do what I can do. And everyone, should be willing to do that. But you can't let it become your problem, because you're just going to be right down there with them. And sometimes you may have to find a point where you cut it off, because your mental health is important too. Do not throw yourself in the hole with them. Don't let them drag you down if they're not willing to get any better. Something we didn't talk about. But yeah, like Kenny said, get help. Quit being a hard ass. Like, just talk to somebody, even if it's every now and then. They'll give you the tools for when something does happen, because it will happen. Everyone will deal with something at some point. They'll set you up so that you can deal with it better.
You are not alone. There are people out there that want to help you.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to, 988 is the Suicide and Crisis Hotline.
Yep.
If you are part of the LGBTQ plus community, you can call for the Trevor Project at 1-866-488-7386. But besides that, this whole episode was about it's okay to get help. And it's hard for people to realize it, but it's so important.
It's okay to get help, and it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to reach out and talk to people. All right. Well, I think we've covered the topic pretty in depth. I think we've kind of wrung out everything there is. I'm sure I'd say there is a lot more we can talk about, but we're gonna keep this at the length it's at. Again, Chris has gave you a couple things to, if you're in crisis, that you can reach out to. We've touched, in depth on the need to get help, even if you're not constantly or currently going through an issue. It's good to be prepared. It's okay to talk about it. That being said, check us out on our socials. You can find all the links to that on BeHonestMan.com. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. The YouTube videos, links to where you can listen to podcasts on any of the platforms that you listen to it on. Until next time, be honest, man.